everyone. This is ring announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to the Inside Boxing Weekly show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly, as always, is brought to you by the Retired Boxers Foundation. You can look them up on Facebook. You can look up Alex Ramos, who is one of the main men in charge there, has done some great work. They've helped out a lot of boxers that are having problems. So make sure you check out the Retired Boxers Foundation. I'm your host for the show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing really, really good. Excited to be on with you guys and finally talk some boxing. Let's get it going.
All right, and next up is our resident lawyer from West Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, all points in between, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, good to be here. Look out, I got a lot of words bottled up since we haven't gotten to talk for a little while.
Yeah, it's been a while since, Jeremiah is one of the greatest softball players in the state of Colorado and has to play 24/7. First up, we're going to talk about Saddam Ali, who took a replacement for Liam Smith and Jaime Munguia. And I would say that, John, it'd have been a lot better off if he'd have fought Liam Smith.
Yeah, he's saying, where have you gone, Liam Smith, right now? And this one I did call on Twitter beforehand. Munguia, surprisingly, was a slight underdog. But on our show, I had mentioned I thought that he was the best prospect I saw last year. And, primarily because the guy hits like a freight train. And with Saddam Ali having trouble taking a punch, it was just a bad matchup to me for Ali. But one thing I think we do well on this show, including you, Mike, and Jeremiah, that bothers me, I see all around is what I consider lazy analysis. In other words, I know when you looked in the ring, you could see, Munguia looked bigger than Saddam Ali. But, Munguia was fighting as a welterweight not too long ago also, and Saddam Ali had been knocked out by Jesse Vargas, who's a non-puncher at welterweight. And, of course, Vargas had fought a lot at 140. And what I'm getting at is every matchup does not have to do with the size differential or because one guy moved up from an alphabet-created weight class or moved to an alphabet-created weight class. If Errol Spence is going to go up and take on Sergey Kovalev next month, that's a size differential that might make a difference in the fight. But a lot of these fights are not coming down to size only. It's lazy analysis. There's other things involved. And here it is, when you get a puncher like Munguia in with a soft-chin guy like Ali, that's a bad matchup. I mean, that's Marvis Frazier, Mike Tyson stuff, because Marvis Frazier could fight otherwise, but Marvis Frazier couldn't take a good shot. And there's countless
Marvis
other
Frazier, Larry
examples
Holmes, Ken Norton,
right.
Guys like that.
Right.
I think the size played a little bit into it. And the thing is this, Munguia was a welterweight not too long ago, but Munguia is pretty young too. So he's going to grow and get bigger. I just think the prevailing factor here, John, is I think people read way too much into beating a well past his prime Miguel Cotto. Yeah,
well, especially because Cotto's only win after the Canelo fight was against Kamagai. So, you can kind of extrapolate all that, and that's where people start making mistakes. And like I said, I don't think in this show, I know it's our show, but I don't think we fall into that trap. I agree with you, Mike. I'm not saying, Munguia did look bigger than him in there. Obviously did, and he's 6 feet tall, but this was a case of a guy with a bad chin going up against a guy that, just hits like a freight train.
Yeah, but it doesn't help that the guy that hits like a freight train is physically a lot bigger too.
Yeah, it's a factor, but it's not the only thing that's deciding the fight, though. And for Ali, ideally, Liam Smith is good because Liam Smith's not a big puncher. So when he lost that matchup, That was bad news for Ali. And as I saw somebody put on Twitter shortly after the fight, which I chuckled at and I have to agree with, I think Liam Smith just got another allergic reaction after he saw Munguia take out Ali.
Well, I think this, though, Jeremiah, I think that watching Munguia knock out Saddam Ali doesn't tell me that Munguia is a great fighter. It tells me he has the potential to be a great fighter. But we still got to see him get hit on the chin. I think the kid can fight, though. I'm just saying that, as always, it's kind of like the start of the NFL season. If your team comes out and beats the Patriots 40-10, and all of a sudden everybody thinks your team's going to be in the Super Bowl and they end up 4-12, I think people are reading too much into this. I think Munguia could be that good, but I still think there's a lot of questions he has to answer.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Well, and that's one thing you kind of saw from people afterwards is they're like, yeah, now he's one of the top guys in the division. We got to pump the brakes a little bit. I mean, I like what I saw, and as we're talking about sizes and everything, of course, it wasn't his size that was landing those left hooks, right? It was his ability to get Ali to drop his right hand and then connect. Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot more to do, but one thing that it did kind of open up people's eyes to is, we were talking about beforehand, and Bob Bennett of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, said that Munguia wasn't ready for Golovkin, and I agree with that assessment, but still, I mean, you look at Munguia and you look at Vanes Martirosyan or Spike Sullivan, you think Munguia's not going to be as competitive, or maybe a little bit more so. To me, it looked like he would have been a stiffer test than Vanes Martirosyan was. But yeah, people got to take it easy with these declarations. Ali's a skilled guy, but again, he's chinny. So it was a good win. Puts him on the face of things. Now people can look out for him, and he's getting at least some recognition that he deserves. But we'll see how it goes from here. And I'd like to see him contend with some of the best.
Well, I think this with Munguia, I think the advantage here is this: he's not going to make a whole lot of money to fight Golovkin a couple of weeks ago, but with this knockout, everybody knows who he is now. So if he does get that chance, whether it's against Golovkin or Saunders, he's going to make a lot more money than he would have made doing it a week or two ago.
Right, yeah. Not only that, since he's Mexican, I mean, if imagining that Canelo Alvarez and Golovkin don't fight, or if we're looking ahead for potential opponents for Canelo Alvarez, that could sell pretty damn well in Mexico now, right? I mean, you had Canelo Alvarez put 40,000 people in the seats in San Antonio, Texas. Well, you get a fight against Munguia, a guy who keeps knocking guys off. That might be a big fight too.
All right, next up, we move to Jorge Linares, getting stopped in the 10th round by a left hook to the liver from Vasyl Lomachenko. Of course, we'll let Jeremiah speak first because Jeremiah has a man crush on Lomachenko. What was your take on the fight?
I mean, I've been a big Jorge Linares fan for a long time as well. I mean, I like both of these guys.
Yeah, but you're in love with Lomachenko.
Well, yeah, he makes it hard, though. I mean, because not only is he a fantastic fighter, but he's handsome,
Okay.
No, but
John, you want to do the rest of this show, just me and you?
No.
We'll let Jeremiah take care of the Lomachenko praise part.
John, Jeremiah said the same thing about you the other day when you weren't on the line.
I don't think I'm as elusive as Lomachenko, though.
That's good. That's good for me.
I bet you would be if Jeremiah was chasing you for other reasons.
Hey, he's got that long distance running in. I'm sure he's got some evasive maneuvers ready.
Yeah, I think this is a fight, Jeremiah, where size did come into effect here. Because I think if Linares and Lomachenko were the same size, Lomachenko probably wins this fight pretty easy. But Linares impressed me. I've never been real impressed with him. I thought he was a good fighter, but I didn't think the competition was that great. And I think Linares, if you look back at his fight against DeMarco to where he's come today, is he's improved as much as anybody in the world. And I know I had him up 5-4 at the time, and so did John, because that was about the time I texted both of you. And that was a hell of a fight, and a lot of people are saying Lomachenko's not as good now because he got knocked down and he was in a fight. But to me, I think this makes me think more of Lomachenko just because he overcame something like that.
Well, yeah, and it's oftentimes that boxing fans get a little ahead of themselves. It's you see it's like everybody's got to be a boxing god anymore with some of these fans, because of the hypercritical nature in which a lot of these fans exist. But you look at the knockdown itself, and Lomachenko's up at the count of 2, count of 3. I mean, he's up quickly. He doesn't look that hurt, afterwards. He starts the next round, in it only a slightly different posture. It's not as if he was walking around on weak knees or anything. But I want to give Linares credit too, because he was able to counterpunch effectively. The right hand that knocked him down was fantastic. I mean, but the thing about Linares is I've always felt it as if he's a pound.
You there, Jeremiah?
And Mike, this is John. I just had a technical difficulty for a minute.
All right, I'll have to call you back because Jeremiah has to be on hold when you're there. So.
Yeah, sure.
You there, Jeremiah? John.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, I guess I'll have to call Jeremiah back then.
Okay.
All right, so he'll be coming back in a second. When you looked at this fight, though, John, was it what you expected?
No, Mike, I agree with quite a bit of your analysis there. Linares, I thought he was decent before the fight, but he fought much better than I expected. I think he used his reach some and his height some, and that helped him, but I don't think it was only that. I think that he had better hand speed than I expected, and he was actually able to match hand speed with Lomachenko, which was very surprising to me. And also he had a good game plan where he used proper punches for fighting a southpaw. He did that very well, and including that straight right hand right down the pike that he dropped Lomachenko with. So I was also impressed with Linares. He fought better than I thought. And then it comes down to, with Lomachenko, you can look at it both ways. You can look at what you mentioned, Mike, and I think it's part of that the guy showed he can rebound from some adversity and hang in and not fold. He was on the canvas. On the other hand, you could say that Linares made him look human, and Lomachenko is 30 years old. Lightweight's a relatively lighter weight class, and Linares himself is 32, and maybe some of the guys that are a bit younger and also talented might be able to give Lomachenko more than we expected.
Yeah, Jeremiah, is back?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened there. Where did I trail off?
John called back, and when it calls back, it makes you get on hold. So if you guys know, if you ever get bumped off, I'll call you back so everything works seamlessly.
Got it.
Right, okay.
So when I look at this fight now, and I already had questions about this, the fight I want to see, probably, if I had to pick my 3 biggest fights in boxing, this would be Mikey Garcia against Lomachenko. And I think this makes me want to see it even more now, because when I look at this, Jeremiah, I think Lomachenko should be fighting at 126 or 130. I think those are his best weights. Not that he can't win at 135, but I think he's taking much bigger risk. But when I look at it, that's kind of what I'm impressed with by him.
Right, yeah. So we're talking about a guy, and I made this point elsewhere, because here on this show we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to the junior and super weight classes and all the alphabet trinkets. Lomachenko could legitimately be. With his talent level, he could be a featherweight and lightweight champion. And, you put that in a historical context, and that could be significant. I mean, the problem is that he's, like so many other guys, he's been shafted by the era in which he's fighting. Top Rank and Al Heyman, they were at odds with each other. There was a lawsuit, so there was no chance that Lomachenko was going to get a fight against Santa Cruz or Carl Frampton, and that's to his detriment. That's the detriment of his resume. Okay, so he moves up to 130. There's not really a whole lot going on there, and then he goes up to 135, and he fights, what is widely seen as the best lightweight in the world in Jorge Linares, and he overcomes, despite the size differential, Those are impressive things. I mean, in his first fight up at 135, he's fighting Jorge Linares. But like you said, naturally his best weight is 126. In fact, if you go look at the post-fight weigh-ins, I think against the Asian fellow after Gary Russell Jr., in which he hurt his hand and he had to fight about half of it with an injured hand. I believe he weighed about 128 or 129. I think he only put on 2, 3, or 4 pounds after the weigh-in. And if you're, too big for the weight division, I mean, we see what happens time and time again. And in fact, from what I'm hearing, but I haven't heard any confirmation from it, I've heard that Linares was, a welterweight or about 152 pounds going into that fight with Lomachenko. I can't confirm that. I don't know. I'm not quite sure he was that big. But, we're talking about a guy who belongs at featherweight, and I'd love to see him go back down there again if, there was a way to make a fight with Leo Santa Cruz or Carl Frampton. I think that'd be fantastic, and I think that would do a lot for his resume. But seeing as if that's unlikely, you don't oftentimes see a fighter move back down a weight class. Garcia's got to be where it's at. I mean, Garcia is clearly the bigger man. He's a sharp fighter. I think he's got an excellent style. In terms of, being a technician, I'm not sure there's anybody better. But I'd love to see the fight not only because they're the two best lightweights in the world, and it would be something to look forward to. But I think the stylistic differences, make it interesting here. I mean, we saw that Lomachenko has at least some vulnerabilities, can be counterpunched at least a little bit. But, I would still favor Lomachenko in a matchup like that because Garcia doesn't have this free-flowing style that Linares does, where, Linares doesn't have a problem letting his hands go, throwing 3, 4, 5 punch combinations. Garcia is a bit more predictable in that sense, where he relies a lot on the 1-2. But maybe the physical size would be just enough. I mean, I would like to see how well Garcia cuts the ring off against a boxer mover. I haven't seen a lot of that with him, but it's a fight that's got to be made. And I'm hoping later on this year. I mean, because you look at Garcia, he's going to be fighting Robert Easter in the summer. Apparently, Lomachenko is going to have a quick turnaround time, and he's going to be fighting Ray Beltran in August. So I think you can both get those fights out of the way, and then later on in the year, November, September, maybe December, you get the fight for the lightweight championship of the world.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about that fight, John, is Mikey Garcia and Vasyl Lomachenko are guys that you could put in 1979 on ABC's Wild World of Sports, and they would fit right in. They're technically very good, and they're both guys that I think, especially with Lomachenko, aren't afraid to take a chance.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're headed in the lightweight division where boxing needs to go, but I think let's not get carried away with the Lomachenko size issue. He fought as a lightweight in the amateurs extensively. Linares was a featherweight. Mikey Garcia was a featherweight. Lomachenko had a tough time. It wasn't because he moved up 5 pounds. It was because Linares is a better fighter than some of the guys that he's fought recently. He is a taller guy. That could be a factor, but it's just not all because of the weight. And, Mikey Garcia was also a featherweight. I think Lomachenko is going to be a favorite if he fights Mikey Garcia the way some of the sports books that place advanced odds have it already. Myself, I give Mikey Garcia a very slight edge there. I've said it for the last year or two since Mikey Garcia has been back. I still feel that way. I feel it even more after Saturday night. But it's very close, and it's certainly a fight Lomachenko could win. Lomachenko, obviously very talented. He shows he's got heart and resilience. He didn't panic. He didn't fold up when he got dropped. And I did think Linares had a slight edge in the fight. But I don't think Linares quit or anything like some people were saying. I think he just got caught with a good body shot.
Yeah, that's silly.
Yeah, and Lomachenko, he took out Rocky Martinez with one shot as well. Why I say that is I see improvement in Lomachenko there. Of course, he was very early on in his pro career, and he, went right to the upper levels right out of the amateurs. But, sometimes he was taking a little while to get started, and he wasn't punching with as much authority at times. I think he started a little slow Saturday night, but punches with more authority now. I think he knows how to pick it up and finish when he needs to. better than he did when he started out. And why I say that is I think he would have taken out Salido in that first Alphabet Belt title shot if he just started a little earlier. I think he was by far the superior fighter, and I think people make too much of that fight. I just think that Lomachenko started a little slowly, and I think he would have gotten him out of there if he just picked it up a couple rounds earlier. So I think when you take Mikey Garcia is going to apparently fight Robert Easter. We just had a great matchup with Lomachenko and Linares. That was a better fight than even expected. And if somehow Lomachenko and Garcia could get together, that would be great. A true lightweight title fight. Like you said, Mike, going back to the original 8 type of days. But I think when we talk about size, we'll see where it doesn't matter with Lomachenko's next fight if it's Beltran, because he'll beat Ray Beltran, who's been a lightweight for a long time. He'll beat him to a pulp.
Yeah, but
and
Bob Arum's not today very good. There's all kind of fat guys people can beat up, John. Come on, that doesn't mean anything. I think this.
But Bob Arum's talking about it for pay-per-view today. So how about that?
Jesus.
So much for your ESPN Plus. Yeah.
Ray Beltran?
Yeah, Lomachenko Beltran's going to pay-per-view. Yeah.
Well,
Jesus.
That'll be awesome.
Well,
that's a fight I won't see.
No.
Neither will anyone else.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I'll be watching it. I'll just be watching it on some streaming site, because I'm not giving anybody my money. Not when you're especially when you know the undercard's going to be crap anyways.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Bob Arum has a tendency to do this. I mean, you're not going to milk guys for this sort of. It'd probably be one of those. I mean, I know Lomachenko started to build a big base and whatnot, but come on. I mean, we all recognize a terrible fight when we see one. Even fans that don't pay that much attention know. I mean, you go watch Ray Beltran and he sees his last fights and watch him struggle against guys that, if he was really a banger, and as skilled as he looked a few years back, I mean, he should have been getting those guys out of there at least. Well, I will say that the guy that he fought before the last guy was a slick guy and was underrated. I mean, that was a guy who was in with Uchiyama and showed some things defensively. So, but come on, we all recognize that Ray Beltran is not even close to the level of Vasyl Lomachenko. That's going to be a mismatch. But I guess if you care about the alphabet trinkets and you're Bob Arum, I guess it makes some sense, because what then happens is, Lomachenko holds the WBA and Beltran holds the WBO. Garcia holds the WBC. Easter holds the IBF. And so essentially what you're doing is you're having them unify, and then you're having them, for quote unquote undisputed championship later in the year. Bob Arum's been a little ridiculous in his some of the things that he's been saying lately, like negotiating with Mikey Garcia is worse than Donald Trump trying to negotiate with North Korea. I mean, he says stupid shit like that time and time again. I mean, you look at some of the stuff that he was saying before the Regan fight, like it's a shit fight, he didn't want to bother with it, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just make the fight, okay? I mean, make the fight that the fans want to see. Boxing, I mean, I think even John would agree with this a little bit, with the announcement of the World Boxing Super Series and, the bantamweights and whatnot. There is some things to look forward to, right? With Eddie Hearn making that $1 billion deal with DAZN, right? There are some things that, sort of give boxing people hope. But you got to get the fights like Lomachenko and Garcia done. Nobody wants to see Lomachenko fight the Ray Beltrans of the world for a while. Nobody wants to see the Mikey Garcias fight, Robert Easter's of the world. I like Robert Easter, and I think he's a damn good fighter. But we really want to see the best fight the best, okay? Yeah. If you go off and, you pair Garcia, you pair Lomachenko, go ahead, make a defense against a guy like Robert Easter. But fight, make the best fight the best, and people tune in. It's as simple as that. I'm not quite sure why they don't understand.
When you've got Linares, Lomachenko, you got Easter and Garcia, you basically have a World Boxing Super Series without being called that.
Right, you do. And again,
I've got no problem with it, because Robert Easter's a young, talented guy. It has nothing to do with me spending a couple hours with him. I think he's a good fighter. I just don't think he's improved enough. He's not on that level. But I'm all right with that. I'm not all right with Ray Beltran. Because the thing to me is, Ray Beltran, he is what he is, and that's not good enough to be competitive. Robert Easter at least has a ceiling still because he's a young guy, if that makes any sense. There's still the possibility maybe he improves and maybe he can put up a fight. I don't think he can, but I think there's at least that possibility. I would watch that fight, but Ray Beltran, I'm not that interested in watching. All right, now we'll talk about a fight that John Einreinhofer's not that interested in watching. And I think it's because he doesn't like British people. But Lee Selby is going to fight Josh Warrington. They're going to fight in Leeds over in the UK. This is a super fight over there, John. I know you don't like it because they don't hit that hard. But Seby-Warrington, they both are two skilled guys. I think Selby has a little bit more skill. I think Selby will win this fight by a decision. What's your take on this?
Yeah, nothing against any British fighters. I don't like two non-punchers fighting each other. These guys both have very low KO percentages. Doesn't matter if they're American, British, Japanese. When you take low KO percentage guys and put them in with each other, that's bad matchmaking. It's not bad matchmaking in the UK because there's interest, but it's bad matchmaking for the rest of the world. Selby's legitimately a top featherweight. I like his talent level. All three of us have agreed it's kind of a shame that the hourglass is going out for him without him getting to test himself against somebody really at the top of the division. I know that Warrington has just kind of cracked the edges of the transnational top 10 and the ring top 10, but he's not a puncher, and that really is his ceiling. So I just see here, the best you're going to get is a lot of punches thrown, but not a lot of hard punches thrown, and Selby should win a clear decision here. To me, there's not even much doubt about what the ultimate outcome is either. So two non-punchers, not too much doubt about who wins to me. I'll go with Selby decision, and for the fans in the UK and everywhere else in the world, I think the best, and it will be on the Showtime stream here in the US, and I'll be watching it. The best I think we're going to hope for is a lot of punches thrown, and so let's hope for that.
See, I'm going to miss it. I usually like those 4 or 5 o'clock fights because I can watch them in peace because my wife's at work. But I'm going to be in Panama City this week, so I'll be at the beach at 5 o'clok. So if they could hit harder, maybe not. But I really like Selby.
If a puncher was in there, you might take a break from the beach and go up and watch it on your phone. But
I don't know. The beach sounds really nice right now because I'm from a place where it just stopped snowing about 3 weeks ago. So, Jeremiah, what's your take on Seby-Warrington?
Oh, well, I think John's getting risky here with a Selby decision pick. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I'm not on a limb.
Come on. What do we think's going to happen here? I don't like to talk with this sort of authority, and act like I know so much. But, this one seems written in stone. Warrington, to me, is not a top 10 level guy. He's a guy that, has a high work rate, and I commend him for that. He's a blue-collar kind of guy. That's part of the reason why he has so many fans who turn out to watch him time and time again. Again, he's a go-getter, right? I like that, but it'd be one thing if he could crack an egg, and unfortunately he's not doing that. He's really beaten nobody of note. He beat up Kiko Martinez, who's been, a British whipping boy for a few years now. Frampton beat him twice. I think Scott Quigg beat him as well. It's not really, Warrington getting to him a little bit later isn't all that special. Selby is just clearly the better skilled, in my opinion. He's taller, he's rangier, he understands distance better. He's just a superior fighter. And so it's going to be a decision by Selby. I would like to see Selby go out there and try to get a knockout, however. That would up his stock, in my opinion. I think it up his stock for us and the British fans. But afterwards, we got to start focusing on fights like Carl Frampton, right? Put Selby versus Frampton. Put him against Gary Russell Jr. or whoever wins the Russell Jojo Diaz fight. You gotta pit these guys against one another so we can really see what they've got.
All right. Next up, we've got, as you said, Gary Russell Jr. against Jojo Diaz for the WBC World Featherweight title. I give Diaz a real shot here, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to give him a real shot because, Gary Russell is a highly talented individual, But when you take as many layoffs as he has, it almost seems, as if, hey, eventually he's going to get knocked off, and then he's going to be, in a sport like boxing, you could become a has-been really quickly.
Yeah, he's
and
fought 4 times in the 4 years since losing to Lomachenko.
Yeah, you just can't do that, especially as a guy that just about everybody views as a top 3, top 4 featherweight. I mean, he looks excellent. I mean, besides the Lomachenko fight, he's looked pretty damn good in every outing. But Diaz, he stayed active. He's got a nice style, strong amateur background. I'm still going to favor Gary Russell Jr. here. I think he's fast. I think he's the fastest fighter on the planet at the moment. His hand speed's blazing. Of course, he doesn't always commit to his shots, which can be a problem. It's a big problem against, in his only loss. But I think he's the faster of the two. I actually think he hits harder than Jojo Diaz as well. I think he was. I think his combination punching is better. What you're going to get is you're going to get 2 guys. I think there's going to be a lot of feeling out in the beginning, but I think as the fight progresses, Gary Russell's speed and his power is going to start to come into play. And I think he's just going to be, I fear a little bit for his accuracy, but I do think that he's going to be the more accurate fighter. And I think he's going to win a decision here. It's a tough fight. It could go either way, but I still think Russell has just enough. I don't think he's, past his physical prime yet. And so I think he's going to make his mark, and then hopefully he gets, Santa Cruz, Frampton, Selby, or one of those guys, because that's really what he deserves if he wins.
All right, John?
Yeah, I like what we've got going on Saturday night in Canada and the U.S., where Showtime showing the split site card with Stevenson, Jack, and Russell and Diaz. Why I tie that in, just given my remarks of preface here, is because this could be the most competitive night of boxing, high-level boxing of the whole year. When you take 2 fights like that. There hasn't been a line out yet on Russell and Diaz, which, is interesting because that means the handicappers are having some trouble getting a bead on it sometimes. I am too. My opinion of Diaz has changed a lot in the last year and a half or so. Wasn't that, U.S. Olympian, but wasn't that high in the way he looked coming up. Thought he looked underpowered. He's still not a power puncher, but I think he's punching better. He looks to me like a guy that's improved a lot. And when you have the inactivity of Russell that Jeremiah mentioned and Mike, you mentioned, that makes this one tight for me, and I'm having some trouble making a pick on this one. Leaning slightly towards Russell, but don't feel strongly yet. This one's tightened up a lot for me. I'd like to see a line, not because I don't go against the line at times. I went with Munguia against Ali last week, but I just like to get a feel for what the money guys are thinking there, and I don't have that yet. I think it might be pretty close. Russell favorite. I'd have to give a slight edge to Russell here because he's performed extremely well with who he's been with when he's been in the ring in recent years. He's had the sporadic activity, but he sort of developed a style of power boxing that I like a lot where, he's a boxer, but he's boxing with power punching, and he's got the hand speed, and that's a pretty devastating combination. His only loss to Lomachenko, who's arguably at the top of the sport right now, so that's in his favor. Jojo Diaz, like I said, to me, a guy that's gotten a lot better, but when I look at who's on Jojo Diaz's resume at this point, there's not that real great test. Jason Velez doesn't really qualify as that, and some of the other guys he's got on there to make it quite enough where I could pick him over Russell, but I think he is a guy that really has improved a lot, and I think this type of fight has the chance where neither guy loses in the eyes of the boxing public's marketability. I think it's one of those fights that's got a chance where both of them perform that well, that neither guy's stock drops. So I'd say maybe that kind of a fight with a slight edge to Russell.
All right, next up, you talked about the other fight, and I want to go on record as saying they both went Russell. I'm going with Jojo Diaz to upset and win the fight. But this is the thing. If you like Jojo Diaz or you like Gary Russell Jr., they were both on the Ringside Boxing Show in the last 2 weeks. You can go on to gruelingtruth.net. Dennis Taylor, John Raspani interviewed both of those guys. Very interesting interviews, both really good guys. Next up, we're going to take a 1-minute commercial break. Because let's face it, we need a commercial because my dog's got to pee. But we'll be back in 1 minute. We'll talk Adonis Stevenson against Badou Jack. Then maybe we'll do a little Triple G talk before we wrap it up. So we'll be back right after this.
Replenishing Technologies helps athletes of all levels train, recover, and perform at their absolute best. We do this by offering the PEMF 120, the world's leading pulsed electromagnetic field therapy device. Workouts, injury, and stress cause cells to lose their natural power. PEMF works like a battery charger, helping cells regain the power needed to dump toxins, take in oxygen and nutrients, and repair. 95% of athletes report less pain, increased range of motion, more energy, and they simply feel better after using PEMF 120. If you'd like to count yourself among that group, contact us at www.replenishingtechnologiesinc.com.
All right, guys, we're back on Inside Boxing Weekly, and our next fight is a fight I've looked forward to for a while because I think Jeremiah Adonis Stevenson is finally fighting somebody that is a worthy challenger to his title. Of course, he has a tendency to not fight anybody, and infrequently does he not fight anybody, if that makes any sense. When you look at him, his last win was over Funfara. The year before that, Thomas Williams. The year before that, Tommy Karpinski, who I think John knocked out in the West Virginia bar a couple of years ago. And then a unanimous decision against Saki Obika. He fought twice that year, so that was pretty good. I think Badou Jack's going to pull the upset here, Jeremiah. Am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy, actually. I mean, we're talking about Gary Russell Jr. and his inactivity. Well, look at Adonis Stevenson and then multiply that, because not only is he inactive, but unlike Gary Russell, he's not young. So, we're talking about a guy who's, 39, 40 years of age at, 175. His prospects, I think, just don't bode well. I mean, even if he overcomes Badou Jack here, the hourglass is just about run out here. But yeah, no, I don't see how you can think that this would be a non-competitive fight. I mean, I know Badou Jack got knocked out by Hoops and Derek Edwards early, but since then he's looked a lot better. Stevenson he's a southpaw, but as we know, the last thing to go is your power, and Stevenson still is one of the biggest bangers at 175, possibly the biggest puncher they've got there. Badou Jack has stayed active. He's been fighting at a high level of competition lately. Whereas Jack really hasn't. So I do find that intriguing. My problem with Badou Jack in this fight is that he has a tendency to put the mitts on, and he comes forward. It's not as if he doesn't give you any lateral movement, but it's just slight. If you just stand there and you put your hands up against Adonis Stevenson, typically a guy like Stevenson will move around you. He'll jab you. He'll toss straight left hand a lot. So stylistically, I think it plays in Stevenson's favor, but because of Stevenson's inactivity and age, Jack just might walk forward and just let his hands go and end up getting a stoppage win. Because I think if there's one thing that we can say, not only about Jack, but also about Stevenson, is there's a possibility of a knockout. I mean, Stevenson was knocked out, round 1, 2, or 3 against Darnell Boone. So it's not as if, we're talking about a granite chin here. Again, Badou Jack suffered a similar fate, but it's stylistically, I think there is some interest there, and I'm not quite sure who I want to go with, in terms of that, because I think that both can punch pretty well, but I'm going to favor Adonis Stevenson slightly, because I think his power is the bigger of the two. I think he's a bit more experienced. I think stylistically he plays into his hands a bit more. I don't know. It's tough to call here, but I'm going to say that he stops Jack in the late round.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem here is just the inactivity and not fighting anybody for Stevenson. With his age on top of it, I just think that's a lot to overcome, John.
It's a danger for Stevenson at any time now. He's 40 years old. But and the odds makers have this one almost even, but Stevenson is actually a very, very slight favorite. I'm going to go with Stevenson on this one. He's at risk because of his age, but I think this is another example of what we talked about at the top of the show with Munguia and Ali. Stevenson is pretty good at picking out the opponents, and he's got a guy whose chin's not that strong. Jack, he got dropped by DeGale. He's been stopped by a journeyman earlier in his career. Hasn't fought that many really particularly good punchers, and Stevenson is arguably the hardest puncher in the division. I think Stevenson gets the bomb in on him and takes him out. I think Jack would have to be an elusive boxer. You think of somebody like Tommy Morrison, who maybe didn't have the best chin in the world, and that's why George Foreman was looking at him. But Tommy Morrison was fast, and Tommy Morrison adjusted, and he boxed George Foreman. He got the decision. I mentioned that because I don't think Badu Jack can do that. He's 34 years old. I think people forget that. He's not some 25-year-old young phenom who had one stumble. He's a 34-year-old guy. He's not elusive. He gets hit. Took quite a few shots against DeGale, and DeGale hasn't looked good at all lately. And that fight ended up being a draw, even though I did think Jack won it. And I just think that it's the type of thing, it could be the end of the line for Stevenson. That's coming up real soon. Is this it or not? That's what everybody's wondering. And I think he gets by with one more here. I think at light and heavyweight in this day and age, not weighing in the day of the fight, these guys come in like heavyweights of the old days. And why that matters to me is at 40, it might give Stevenson a little bit more running room at light heavyweight than he would have had in a previous era at that age. And I think he gets by on the power on this one more time.
All right. Boxing news. Anything you guys want to talk about? Or we could talk about Gennady Golovkin, Vans Martirosyan, which was a couple weeks ago. What was your take on the fight, Jeremiah?
I didn't expect it to end so damn early. Vans Martirosyan looked like the smaller guy in there, but you look at his resume, and he's fought Demetrius Andrada, Jermall Charlo, Willie Nelson, Arislandi Lara twice. This is a guy who's shown time and time again that he's got a pretty damn good chin. And he knocked Demetrius Andrada down. So this is a guy who has ability. He had a good amateur background. Of course, the long layoff, of course, that played a factor there. But I expected Martirosyan to get some rounds in, but he just got overwhelmed after having a pretty solid first and just got cracked with a left hook that I thought was about to take his head off. But it was a good performance by both guys. I felt bad for Vans a little bit because he's always been a nice guy, and he's been one of those guys who's tried to remain clean as well, because I know he's been working with Victor Conti, and he exposed Memo Heredia a while back with, a pet plan and all this stuff. But I felt a little bit bad for him because he got the brunt of Golovkin's fury, which was initially aimed at Canelo Alvarez. But, he'll be just fine. Golovkin gets some work in, and he can look forward to later dates. Not a whole lot to talk about, but it was a nice knockout.
All right, John.
I think what happened to Vans Martirosyan is why he was there. I again think in this fight, in Golovkin's favor, I don't think this was because of Martirosyan fighting at 160 instead of 154. That's not why he got knocked out. Why he got knocked out was because he hadn't fought for 2 years. He can't really punch, and he's lost 3 of his last 6. He was a U.S. Olympian. I don't think he was a guy without talent either. But when you take a guy, and he was on short notice, you take a guy that hasn't fought in 2 years, who's not a puncher, and he's on short notice to get ready for Gennady Golovkin, who's been in training for Canelo Alvarez, arguably the biggest fight of his life. And that's why Martirosyan was there. He was there to get steamrolled, and that's what happened. If a guy like Munguia was in there who hits like a freight train, and Golovkin, who even in the first round against Martirosyan, who hadn't fought for 2 years, got hit, if Golovkin knows he can walk through you because you don't have the talent or the power, he's gonna come right through you. But a guy like Munguia is as young as he is, with his size and power, and Golovkin getting hit, he's capable of making it interesting. That's what I said before this fight, but Martirosyan wasn't, and pretty much he was in there to do what happened to him, which is a guy on a couple weeks' notice who hadn't fought for 2 years, which is no chance.
But in his last 6 fights, he lost a split decision to Andrade, who people wanted Golovkin to fight. He went the distance with Charlo. He went the distance with Lara 2 years ago. He got knocked out in the second round by Golovkin. I know that no matter what Golovkin does here, it's going to be criticized. If he would have knocked Munguia out in the second round, you'd have said it was a guy with 12 professional fights that is not a middleweight. So
I wouldn't have said that because I like Munguia and I'd give credit. I give Golovkin credit for his knockouts. I have always said that on this show and otherwise. I think when he had the knockout streak, that's good for boxing. He's getting people out of there. I think it's good that when he gets an assignment like Martirosyan, he gets him out of there. It's just it was a guy going in that because of the circumstances just didn't have a chance, and that's why he was there. I just don't think there's much doubt about it on this one.
All right, Jeremiah.
I mean, yeah, he was certainly put in place. Well, it was a late replacement, and you look at the options there, and you think to yourself, I mean, some people I think have been overly critical of Golovkin in this sense, where they're like, oh, well, they should have thrown in, Billy Joe Saunders or somebody else. Well, fighting Golovkin on short notice. Even Frank Warren said, that's not enough time to, build up a big fight, the one that both would make big money for, and then you look at, hey, it's going to be taking place in California. Well, Vane's Martirosyan, he's Armenian. There's a big community in Glendale there. Martirosyan may have been inactive, but he's been active in the boxing scene, especially in California, for a long time now, and he's well known and well liked there. So I didn't really, I wasn't going to hold that over Golovkin's head too much, but now he'll move on to bigger and better things, and I'm hoping Golovkin, he gets back to his old ways and he fights, 3 times this year. If the Canelo fight comes off in September, hopefully he takes something in December. Just returns to the guy that a lot of us started to adore before he got bogged down in the whole Canelo Alvarez thing. But yeah, we'll see who else he takes on because there are plenty of challenges.
To me, I would rather him just say to hell with Canelo, since Canelo won't even drug test now. I mean, he can make a crap load of money with Billy Joe Saunders. Maybe not as much as Canelo, but as you said, Canelo has basically made his life miserable for 2 years. And the same people that complained about being off 2 years fighting Vane's Martirosyan, those people didn't have a problem with a shot, James Kirkland, getting 18 months off and then fighting Canelo. Those people didn't mind there. I just think that in the end here, I think the sport would be better off if he went and he fought Billy Joe Saunders or Daniel Jacobs or Jamal Charlo.
Yeah, well, and let's talk about something else here after this too. But I actually don't think most people would mind if Golovkin just told Alvarez to kick rocks and ended up deciding to fight Billy Joe Saunders and then honored one of his silly trinket mandatories in Deverenchenko or because the division is now chock full of challengers, worthy challengers. I mean, you just look and they're all chomping at the bit to fight an elder Golovkin now. Again, Saunders, you have Charlo, you have Deverenchenko, you have Jacobs who wants a rematch. Actually, one that I don't really want to see, but would make big money in Japan is a fight with Murata. Now, Murata was able to do something like 20 million views in Japan, which is massive. I mean, that's we're talking about a nation of 120 million. And 20.9 or something like that tuned in to watch his fight. Again, I don't care about the alphabet trinket stuff, but if we're talking about money, and Murata's not a bad fighter either. Either. I think he won a gold medal. But let's venture down this road for just a minute. Okay, so the Ring magazine, right? We had talked about this off air, a little while ago, Mike. Okay, so the editorial board for the Ring, they had unanimously voted to strip Canelo Alvarez of his Ring middleweight championship. Well, Stephen Friedman, a new addition to the ring. Now the publisher, a guy who came in right from Golden Boy, overruled them and gave his own account as to why Alvarez should not be stripped, and that was the final say. And now a lot of people are giving the ring a lot of shit for it.
Well, and they should be, because I've always thought since De La Hoya took over that the ring was corrupt. Actually, I thought that since 1978 United States Boxing Tournament, but this proved it once and for all, John.
Well, I think that this was the wrong decision by the ring. Friedman doesn't have the credibility or the background to have stepped in and done this. I think what I was looking at, which I'll still give these individuals credit. I think, Jeremiah would as well. And actually, we even know some of these individuals. The ring's ratings panel did the right thing. They voted to strip them. The editorial board confirmed it. And then, the publisher Friedman came in and said, no, we're not going to strip them. I think it was a short-sighted move because it damages the ring. I think the ring's ratings panel and editorial board had done a good job of not letting the conflict manifest itself since Golden Boy had bought them. And I think it was a good thing that Golden Boy saved the ring. But I think this bolsters Transnational because the idea Transnational was formed to prevent the possibility of this type of thing happening. Now, to me, it hadn't happened before this. The conflict hadn't manifested itself, but it just did because a good ruling would have been, I think Nevada has a good rule with the strict liability. I think there are some questions about Canelo's circumstances, but that's where the suspension being 6 months instead of maybe a year was actually a good, just result. What the ring could have easily done was follow the recommendation of their editorial board and their ratings panel, looked at it at 6 months when the suspension ended and said, because of these circumstances, we're putting them back into ratings. If they put him in at number 2, say, after Golovkin, the fight could have legitimately been for the vacant ring championship anyway, and they've now messed that up by blowing their credibility. So I think it was a mistake. And, I think Golovkin should still fight Canelo and settle this. I think that's why I give him a pass on the Matarosian fight if he's going to come back and fight in September, because in Golovkin's shoes, why are you going to risk that payday? You could get
why would anybody have
dropped.
to give him a pass?
Let me finish. You could take too many shots. Because, Mike, if he's going to not fight in September, there was no reason to fight a mismatch on May 5th. That was
there
just
is a reason to fight. Number one.
Not on May 5th.
All right, not on May 5th. Why
not? Have to fight on May 5th.
Why not?
Because if he's not going to fight Canelo in September, he can fight a real opponent in July. He doesn't have to fight on May 5th. They moved the site from Vegas.
I'm pretty sure
Mike, they moved the site from Vegas to L.A., so it had nothing to do with the site or anything.
I think it would have to do with something like this. He probably wanted to get paid, and he got screwed because you had Canelo, who was dirty. That was proven by the hair follicle test being done 5 weeks after, and nobody's saying a word about it. But, I mean, this blows my mind that you're going to sit here and you think 6 months is a long enough suspension when Alexander Povetkin should be suspended forever, and you talk about 2-year suspensions for him. And
no, I talk about that after his second positive test.
Yeah, but he didn't take clenbuterol. And the thing is this, he also was not offered after the first test an immediate rematch for the title. And he also, was tested after that. And they test him now. Canelo refuses to sign up for the WBC VADA testing. He will not do that. It's an absolute outright joke. And to say that a man shouldn't get paid on May 5th when it wasn't his fault he didn't get paid on May 5th is a joke. Canelo should have been fined, and that money should have been given to Golovkin. He was already training. What's he supposed to do? Just train 5 months straight, or train a couple months, pay for the training expenses, take a month or two off, and then fight in July when he can fight in May and come back and fight in September or fight in October or November? I mean, to me, if he doesn't fight till November, but he's fighting Danny Jacobs or Jamal Charlo, I don't have a problem with that. And the thing is this, his last, 2 fights were against Canelo Alvarez. They were against Danny Jacobs. All right, you've got guys like Earl Spence to get away with this shit all the time. He still hadn't fought anybody since Kell Brook. You also bring up his last 3 fights for Golovkin. You throw in Kell Brook. And Kell Brook is a legitimately good fighter. Some people thought he had a chance. So why is it that Golovkin has to fight somebody that is this great fighter all the time when other people like Canelo, nobody bitched when he fought Chavez. Nobody bitched when he fought Liam Smith. I mean, we did. But overall, nobody gave him any shit for that. But, Golovkin...
Sure he did. His pay-per-view numbers were down. His pay-per-view numbers were down in those
Yeah, but
fights.
I didn't hear a bunch of people complain about that. And the problem is this. When's the last time Canelo fought anybody that was a threat? Laura?
He fought Golovkin. I think Golovkin was a pretty big threat.
I'm talking about before that, and Golovkin beat him anyways, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, no, he didn't beat him. The fight was a draw.
He beat him.
And I thought that Canelo won it, but the fight scored a draw. But the thing is, look, if Golovkin's to fight in September on Mexican Independence Day, then sure, he couldn't take a tough fight on short notice on May 5th. No problem there. But if he's not going to come back in September against Canelo, then that was a waste of our time on May 5th and people's money. But people can pay for it if they want to. But it's not worth it an HBO subscription for fights like that. That's the thing, and that's getting to be the problem with boxing is things like that. But I think
wait a second. Once again, the problem with boxing are things like that. It's not the fact that Canelo Alvarez screwed everybody. It's the fact that Gennady Golovkin, fighting Vans Martirosyan, that's what's bad for boxing. You have not one time on this show say Canelo Alvarez using, steroids or clenbuterol was bad for boxing, but we'll say that Gennady Golovkin is bad for boxing. When the man has fought Kell Brook, who is, the welterweight champion, Danny Jacobs, Canelo Alvarez. He takes one fight against Van Martirosyan, and all of a sudden that's bad for boxing? I think it would be awesome for boxing if everybody was like Gennady Golovkin, who has never ducked anybody, who's fought everybody, who had to chase Canelo's ass across Mexico for 2 years till Canelo thought it was safe enough to come out of the closet. And then Canelo has to use, clenbuterol. I mean, Gennady Golovkin is so far above the level of Canelo Alvarez. And I'm sorry, so's Danny Jacobs. Jarrell Charlo may end up being that way just because they're straight-up guys that fight. And Gennady Golovkin fights. I mean, Gennady Golovkin, like Marvin Hagler, fought everybody in that middleweight division. He can't help that some of them weren't that good, but as soon as he got a chance to fight the ones that were good, he sure the hell did it. He didn't run and hide from them the way Canelo ran and hide from Golovkin. Jeremiah? Somebody had
Jeremiah.
to say something. I don't know.
So somebody's got to inject themselves, huh? Well, I mean, you listen.
That was a good
you
one.
listen. Yeah. Well, you listen to Golovkin's post-fight statement after Vans Martirosyan, and how, as a fan, can you not appreciate that? I mean, Kellerman's like, "Hey, who do you want to fight?" He's like, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Line him up, and he'll knock him down, or at least he thinks so." I mean, as much as I like Golovkin, unfortunately, with his age and him being an aggressor, I think it's only a matter of time before he gets knocked off. But in the grand scheme of things, if he were to somehow beat, Alvarez in a rematch, or Billy Joe Saunders, or Charlo, or Derevyanchenko, or Jacobs, if he were to somehow put a string together of most of those names or all of those names, that'd be a pretty fucking good resume. Again, it's going to be tough at his age. I mean, he's 36. He's shown signs of decline, in my opinion. But the point is, he wants them all. I mean, commend the guy. I mean, in a day and age of boxing where so many people, they hide out in weight divisions or hide behind trinkets that they call world titles, Golovkin's not one of those guys. I mean, he ascended to the top, and he's not barring any challengers. So good for him. We'll see. Who's next. It seems as if it's going to be Canelo Alvarez, especially with HBO's presentation immediately after the Vans Martirosyan fight. So we'll see. We'll go from there.
All right. Does anybody have any other news they want to talk about?
But real quickly, I want to talk about how Edwin Valero is a 28th degree sparring master. Well, so I just want everybody to know that we're now doing a series. It's all part of the good fun of being anybody who patrols the Facebook boxing groups at any length or Twitter at any length knows that there are just so many people who have opinions that probably shouldn't have those opinions or should keep them to themselves until they develop the experience, and get some nuance there. But, on Mondays, we're going to start doing casual Mondays. We're going to start highlighting people who have opinions that, you just got to scratch your head at. And the funniest one to me was Edwin Valero. This guy has become a modern day legend. And I think it's all much to do about nothing, really. Valero exhibited some nice power. He had he had some nuance in some areas, like he could counterpunch a little bit. You watch the DeMarco fight, but we're talking about a guy who was raw, who didn't have blazing hand speed, had this sort of shuffling footwork, wasn't a particularly good at cutting off the ring, and all of a sudden he's this monster and he's going to beat Vasil Lomachenko.
I'll tell you what, that guy brought up that DeMarco fight and how, he watched it and Valero was out there throwing all these punches all the time. I tried to watch that fight last night on YouTube as I went to bed, and I was asleep by the third round because nothing had happened by then.
No, I was watching the fight too. I mean, it was a lot of missed punches. I mean, and DeMarco's not, he's not slick as snot or anything. I mean, when he's making you miss consistently, it's and if I'm not mistaken, the fight was stopped on cuts. I mean, beating Antonio DeMarco is a fine win, right?
Yeah,
funny enough, Edwin Valero and Antonio DeMarco and Adrian Broner, their two best performances are considered to be, against DeMarco. And again, DeMarco was a good fighter. There's no doubt about that. But if you're telling me that a guy, and even worse off is you see these hypothetical matchups between him and Manny Pacquiao, and they're like, oh, he's a monster. He's going to knock Manny Pacquiao out. According to what? I've been watching boxing for, when Edwin Valero was in his heyday. I don't recall anybody saying, hey, this guy is special. This guy is, potentially going to take over the division.
No,
he's going to run things. Yeah, he was. I mean, well, and he had, an elder, Marco Antonio Barrera, Eric Morales, Manny Pacquiao, who was ascending, Joan Guzman, who had a lot of talented. I mean, that was a guy who, you look back on things and say, hey, maybe if he would have kept it together, he might have done some serious damage there, right? You had Humberto Soto, who really wasn't special, but he was a damn good fighter. He was tough as nails, right? I look at those guys and, Humberto Soto, yeah, sure. I'd probably favor him over Soto, but Guzman, Pacquiao, et cetera, I just don't see it. I mean, people got to get over this whole, they died early and they got a shiny 0 on the loss column. It's exaggerated. It's overplayed. Get over it.
All right, John, any final words, final thoughts? Oh, John's not on anymore. All right, Jeremiah, I don't know if we'll have a show next week or not because I will be on vacation.
Okay.
I want to remind everybody they can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. Remember to check out the Retired Boxers Foundation also, and check out our website, new and improved at thegruelingtruth.net, much faster. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here tonight. Remember, me and Steve Risley will be on tonight at 9 Eastern with Survive in Advance. We will be discussing the new sports gambling laws and also the Toronto Raptors firing of their head coach. Steve's against it. I'm for it. We're going to argue about it. So make sure you check us out tonight live at 9 o'clock on thegruelingtruth.net. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.